On today's show, the Houston Rockets get an offensive tune-up game against the busted-up New Orleans Pelicans. Jalen Green drops a career-high 22 points in the third quarter on the Rockets' way to their blowout win against New Orleans. Plus, we take a look at Alperen Sengun's All-Star campaign and the new NBA All-Star game format. It's all coming up on today's Locked On Rockets.
This is Mission Control, Houston.
Ignition sequence start. 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
What's up and welcome to another edition of Locked On Rockets, your daily podcast home for everything Houston Rockets basketball. As always, I'm your host, Jackson Gatlin, native Houstonian and credentialed media member. I'm also the host of Locked On NBA Thursdays. Be sure to follow along wherever you listen to your podcasts or on YouTube. Just search Locked On Rockets, where the best way that you can help us grow our show is to listen every single day on a podcast platform of your choosing. Like and subscribe on YouTube. Drop a comment while you're there. Tell us your favorite part from this Rockets blowout win against the Pelicans, your favorite moment from Jalen Green's 22-point scoring supernova in the third quarter, or just do a drive-by, say go Rockets. It helps us out a ton. Also, please subscribe to our new daily Locked On Rockets newsletter. The subscriber count there is going very strong. We're now in the top 5 across the whole Locked On network, so I do really appreciate that from you guys. Now, today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. New customers can place a $5 bet, and you'll get started with $150 in bonus bets if you win your first $5 bet. Visit FanDuel.com to get started. And as always, thanks so much for making Locked On Rockets part of your day every single day, whether it's on your way to work, on your lunch break, in the gym. Thank you so much for being an everydayer. The Rockets get the 133-113 win against the lowly New Orleans Pelicans. I don't even know if is it fit? Can we even release the Hounds when it's a team as bad as the Pelicans? Like, this is just a game the Rockets are. I think we got to save releasing the Hounds for good opponents, for good Rockets wins. So we're going to table that for now. We haven't had a chance to release the Hounds in a minute. We'll do that sometime here soon. But look, Rockets did what they're supposed to do. You know, it's a bad Pelicans team. They're still ravaged by injuries. No Zion, no BI, no Jose Alvarado. Just, really a team that's been decimated by injuries all season long. At one point, they had their top 8 guys all out due to injury, like $120 million in salary just sidelined this season. It's been a rough go of it for the Pelicans, honestly. Look, this was a game where the Pelicans had a tiny little bit of an early lead right out of the gate. I'm talking a 4 or 5 point lead for a couple minutes in the first quarter. And then the Rockets just turned it on, and they just opened the floodgates of just an offensive outpour. And we'll talk about, I think, some of the reasons that led to this stellar offensive performance, easily one of the best offensive performances of the entire season for the Rockets. Now, part of it does come as a result of the Pelicans not being a great team right now, so that definitely plays into it a little bit. When you play a bit against bad competition, you get yourselves a chance to, have a little tune-up game. Rest was another factor to consider. Ball movement was another factor to consider, but the Rockets took care of business. They posted, right out of the gate, they had a 14-point lead after the first quarter, 39-25. And then from there, they just kind of coasted the rest of the game. This wasn't the Rockets and their identity that we usually see of them being, this intense, physical, defensive-minded team. They were just kind of coasting on their talent in this game, which is something that we haven't seen them do a ton of this season. In fact, the Rockets didn't even really get after it on the offensive glass much in this game. They only had 11 second chance points compared to 17 second chance points by the Pelicans. And a big result of that was the Rockets actually hitting a lot of their shots offensively. Also, no Tari Eason for the Houston Rockets, who was out with left leg injury maintenance. So Tari getting some much deserved rest here in this game. But the player of the night, the story of this game, was easily Jalen Green, who had one of his best offensive performances of the season and posted a career-high 22 points in the third quarter. He got this game off, on a good start. He had 8 points in the first quarter, went scoreless in the second quarter, then just went full Human Torch mode in the third quarter, dropping 22 points, again, a career high there. And then he had 4 more points in the fourth and final frame on his way to his 34-point outing, 13 of 22 shooting overall, 4 of 10 from downtown, 4 of 5 from the charity stripe. He had 6 rebounds, 3 assists, 1 steal, and 3 turnovers in his 32 minutes of run. And look, It's fun. When Jalen starts scoring like this, it's fun. There's no doubt about it. He looks unguardable. He plays with a different level of confidence, a swagger. There's a joy when you see him like terrorizing opposing teams, when you see him throwing down those ridiculous lob dunks in transition. He had a couple really good ones in this game. He had one from Jabari that I thought was a really great pass by Jabari. Shout out to Bari for, the vision, and just he knew he had Jalen the whole way down the court. Jabari got the pass, I think, from Dillon originally, and then without even, hadn't even taken a half second, the ball was in his hands, and he immediately threw it up to Jalen at the rim for him to throw it down. I think after the game, Jalen said that was his favorite dunk of the night, was, the pass from Bari, because it was such a clean-looking pass. And then Jalen had another lob dunk from Fred, where Fred, gave him, the no-look lob to the rim. And in that third quarter, this is a Pelicans team that's busted up. They're not a great defensive team. They don't have a rim. They don't have, a shot blocker at the rim. So it was kind of easy pickings for the Rockets to be able to kind of get downhill and get whatever they wanted at the cup. But in that third quarter in particular, and Jalen spoke about this after the game, he really got himself going because the Rockets were able to play a little bit faster, play a little bit more up-tempo, really get out in transition. You saw plenty of moments where Jalen was kind of leaking out defensively so that he could get it in transition, or where he'd come up with a steal and then go. He had that one where he got in transition and he missed the dunk because he got fouled, but he realistically should have probably finished the dunk. But I understand, because it's one of those where it's if you're going in transition, somebody's behind you, and you're expecting, okay, do I have to absorb contact? Are they gonna wrap me up? Are they not? Are they gonna let me have a freebie dunk? Whatever. Sometimes you're over, I guess maybe he's overthinking it. There was a little bit of contact on his off arm, but thankfully he had a chance to redeem himself a little bit later after missing that first dunk, where he had pretty much an identical breakaway dunk where DeJounte Murray came in and swiped across his body at the ball, and Jalen went up and powered that one through and got the and one opportunity. So a little bit of a redemption arc there for Jalen on that dunk. But the story of this game is, as awesome as it is, as great as it was seeing Jalen Green explode there in the third quarter and post this 34-point game, the question for the Rockets and the big question for Jalen Green is, how do you get this version of him more often? How do you get this version of Jalen to be more consistent? Because here's the thing is, even in this game, there's a little bit of inconsistency in the game, right? He had an 8-point first quarter, then scoreless in the second, then 22 in the third, and then only 4 points in the fourth quarter. So, even in the game itself, he has some, peaks and valleys and, a little bit of a roller coaster as far as his overall production. And unfortunately, so far this season, most of Jalen's biggest, best games, the games where he has, these, just top tier two guard scoring performances, have come against more inferior opponents, right? His best game of the season, 41 points, was against the super injury decimated 76ers on the second night of a back-to-back, where he really struggled against the Milwaukee Bucks. Or I apologize, not the Milwaukee Bucks, the Minnesota Timberwolves in the NBA, in the cup group play game that went to overtime. His next highest scoring game against the Spurs, a team not even in the play-in discussion right now. Then this game against the Pelicans. Then his best game of the season that came against a quality opponent was the 31-point outing against the Clippers. And then another game against the Spurs, then Charlotte, then Sacramento, who's all kinds of dysfunctional this season, then a good game against the Dallas Mavericks. But it's, how do you get Jalen to have these big, strong games, or can he have these strong scoring performances against teams that are higher quality, against teams with better defenses, right, that are going to slow him down? Because you look at some of his worst games of the season. His worst game of the season, 7 points against the Golden State Warriors, 8 points against the Clippers. So that's a flip where, the Rockets played well in that game. They won, but he only had 8 points on 4 of 11 shooting. Then another bad game against the OKC Thunder, 9 points. 9 points against the Minnesota Timberwolves that night before the Philly game. 10 points against the Portland Trailblazers in that game that the Rockets lost on the second night of a back-to-back against the exact same Blazers team in Houston, right? 3 of 14 shooting there. So how do you get Jalen to be this version of himself more consistently? Because when he plays like this, he looks unguardable. It's so much fun to watch. It's exciting to see him get downhill. It's exciting to see him play with that swagger, that confidence. At one point, I think his final bucket during his little supernova stretch in the third quarter was he was kind of wheeling and dealing, and he was, hit like a little crossover and got to his mid-range game and just like elevated. And the moment he pulled up, I was like, that's going in. I was like, that's money. It's dropping. And sure enough, it did, right? There's like a level to it where when Jalen gets in one of those zones, he's unstoppable. And at one point, shout out to my guy Ryan Hollins, on the broadcast, he said that Jalen's like a microwave man. And I know Ryan meant it as a term of like endearment, like he was trying to compliment Jalen, but that's kind of the issue, right? Is he is kind of a microwave scorer where he gets these stretches where he's just like super duper hot, but then there's also moments outside of it where how do you find ways to get him going? And at this point, I don't know, other than the Rockets played a little bit faster in that third quarter, they got out in transition a little bit more, and Jalen's talked about it before in the past, where when they do play a little bit faster, that plays to his strengths a little bit better, and we've spoken about it on the show, with guys like Fred and Sengun who do like to slow it down a little bit more, play more in the half court. It's a little bit harder for Jalen to play to his strengths alongside those guys, which is why sometimes you see Jalen at his best when he's playing alongside Amin Thompson, Tari Eason, kind of those second unit guys who can, blow stuff up defensively and then get out and run in transition. I'm not really sure what else to take away from this game other than, if the Rockets play a little bit faster, then maybe Jalen can play a little bit more like he did in that third quarter, a little bit more consistently. But other than that, it was Jalen just demoralized, a bad opponent. Rockets took care of business, and it was definitely some exciting basketball to see. I do want to highlight here, the team as a whole had a very strong offensive performance. We're going to highlight some of the areas there: rest, the ball movement, and Ime Udoka bringing up a very interesting point about Fred VanVleet and his role on this Houston Rockets team, as well as we're going to talk about Alperen Sengun, his All-Star campaign, and the new All-Star game format. We're going to get there in just one moment. First, today's episode is brought to you by Prize Picks. So what is Prize Picks? It's the best place to get real money sports action with over 10 million members and billions of dollars in awarded winnings. Prize Picks has made daily fantasy sports accessible to everyone. You just pick more or less on at least 2 players for a shot to win up to 1,000 times your cash. Run your game all season long on Prize Picks, America's #1 daily fantasy sports app. Look, Prize Picks puts their members first, so all withdrawals are fast, safe, and secure. When your picks hit, you can get your money in as quick as 15 minutes. And Prize Picks invented the flex play, which means you can still cash out even if your lineup isn't perfect. You can double your money even if one of your picks doesn't ultimately hit. So if you've been trying to get into daily fantasy sports, try Prize Picks. Download the app today. Use code LOCKEDONNBA to get $50 instantly after you play your first $5 lineup. Again, download the Prize Picks app. Use code LOCKEDONNBA to get $50 instantly after you play your first $5 lineup. Prize Picks. Run your game. Today's episode is also brought to you by Rocket RX. Look, if you're ready to boost your confidence and take control in the bedroom, Rocket RX has the solution. Imagine feeling more prepared and performing at your best. Rocket RX makes it simple and stress-free. Rocket RX offers FDA-approved treatments for erectile dysfunction at a lower cost than branded alternatives. No more uncomfortable doctor's visits or pharmacy trips. Everything is delivered straight to your door in discreet, plain packaging. With Rocket RX, you'll get trusted care from a real U.S. clinical team. Complete a quick 100% online consultation, and you could get your free prescription today. Visit rocketrx.com to get started now. It only takes a couple minutes. Right now, our listeners can get 40% off your first order when you use code LOCKEDONNBA. That's rocketrx.com, code LOCKEDONNBA for 40% off of your first order. Terms and conditions apply. Rocket RX, better sex made simple. And continuing on here at Locked On Rockets, your daily podcast home for everything Houston Rockets basketball. Now, it wasn't just Jalen Green who had himself a night against the New Orleans Pelicans. The whole Rockets team really had a standout level of play. I mean, across the board, Rockets shot the ball better. They moved the basketball better. They had it was easily one of their best overall offensive performances of the season. Again, a lot of games this season, the Rockets have had to rely on their defense. The Rockets were just shooting the lights out of the ball in this game, so it didn't really matter how they played defensively. Again, giving up 113 would be a death sentence in most other games of the season for this Rockets team, but instead they were able to put 133 on the board, so it kind of didn't matter. Jalen Green led the way with that 34 points, but all 5 Rocket starters scored in double figures. Fred VanVleet had the least amount of the 5 starters, though, 13 points on just 3 of 8 shooting, but he did have 9 dimes, couple steals, couple block shots, or, the Fred VanVleet stripped block shots in there. Dillon Brooks was the second high point man for the Rockets. He was just ridiculous in this game. He was on some Kobe Bryant stuff with a couple the turnaround fadeaways that he was hitting. It was ridiculous. 26 points, 10 of 16 shooting for DB, 6 of 10 from downtown, 60% shooting from beyond the arc for DB, along with 7 rebounds, 2 assists, and a steal. Alperen Sengun, a very quiet 23 points on 10 of 14 shooting to go along with 9 rebounds and 7 dimes, as well as a blocked shot. And then Jabari Smith Jr. rounding out the starting 5 with 15 points, 6 of 11 shooting, 3 of 6 from downtown. He had a couple different trailing 3-pointers, just stepping into them with confidence. He had only 2 rebounds and 5 assists, a steal in there. The low rebounding numbers, there have been a couple of games where Jabari's rebounding numbers have just been kind of off, and I do wonder if that's partially because of the scheme that the Rockets are running, where since they're putting Jabari oftentimes on the opposing 5, and then they're putting Sengun on one of the weaker wings, and then Sengun's in position to be that help defender and box out and be around the rim, whereas Jabari's being involved in the actions and switching, and he's out on the perimeter a lot more. I don't think Jabari's not hunting rebounds, because there are still games where Jabari is able to pull down, 10 plus rebounds, but he's had a few games in the last couple of weeks where he's only had less than 4 or 5 boards, and it's a little peculiar. I need to go back and rewatch and see kind of how the scheme is impacting his ability to rebound the ball at a high level. But in this game, the Rockets offense looked phenomenal, and a big part of that was absolutely the rest factor, right? Rockets hadn't played a game since Saturday in the NBA Cup semifinals in Las Vegas against the Oklahoma City Thunder, the game that they ultimately lost. They had 4 days of rest, Sunday, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, before playing this game Thursday night. So really kind of 5 straight days of rest before you got all the way to Thursday evening. And it showed. Every bit of that 5 days of rest showed in this game. The Rockets shot the lights out of the ball, 17 of 39 shooting from downtown, 43.6%. That might be, I don't know it off the top of my head, that might be a season best from beyond the arc for the Rockets as far as percentages go. 57.5% shooting overall from the floor, 16 of 19 to the free throw line, 84.2% there. Just across the board, Rockets looked like a healthy, rested team that had a chance to get a couple good practices under their belt. And it brings up a very interesting discussion here that I wanted to present. And I'm curious your thoughts, dear listeners. So let me know in the YouTube comments. I do really wonder if one of the reasons, not the sole reason, right, but one of the contributing factors to why this Rockets team has been so bad at shooting the ball this season has been because of their identity and their play style on the defensive side of the court. We know that it takes a very, very heavy toll to be the most physical team in the NBA, to be one of the top 2 or 3 defenses in the NBA, to play with that level of grit and tenacity and physicality and kind of FU mentality that the Rockets have every single night on the defense end of the court where they hang their hat. I do really wonder if that has taken a bit of a toll on some of the players really up and down the roster, to where certain guys, maybe they don't have their legs under them, or they're more tired than usual, and then the in-game reps are a lot harder, and then especially by the end of a game, you've just been exerting so much effort and intensity on the defensive side of the court. You don't have much, if at all, anything left in the tank for the offensive side, and that leads to missed shots, that leads to lack of capitalization on offensive opportunities. It would be a great explanation. Maybe it's just copium, maybe I'm just trying to find, maybe I'm grasping at straws here, but it would make a lot of sense for why the Rockets shooting has just plummeted so drastically this season while their defense has improved. It would make a lot of sense as to why Alperen Sengun, who's having the best defensive year of his career, has also struggled offensively with his touch around the basket and finishing some shots that he was, hitting at a very high clip previously. It's not like he just suddenly forgot how to play basketball. These are looks that he's hit for the first 3 years of his career. So I'm very curious. With this Rockets team, they got a ton of rest. They came out of the gate and they had one of their best offensive games of the season. So I do think that was a factor. One other element to consider here is just the Rockets really moved the basketball well in this game. The ball movement was off the charts. They had 34 assists on 50 made shots. And for a team that literally is dead last in the entire NBA in assist percentage, they're all the way down at the bottom at 54.9% assist percentage. So the number of shots that they ultimately assist on. By comparison, the teams at the top of the bracket, the Spurs have a 71% assist percentage. The Denver Nuggets, 69.9%. Nice. The Golden State Warriors, 69.8%. Still nice. The Atlanta Hawks, 69.4%. Still nice. Look, one of those reasons is the Rockets and Ime Udoka and their offensive identity, right, has been don't turn the ball over, make simple, easy reads offensively. They don't have a ton of ball movement in their offensive sets, right? A lot of their offense basically revolves around the two-man game of Fred VanVleet and Alperen Sengun getting into the middle of the floor, collapsing the defense, and kicking it out to an open shooter. There's not a ton of, drive and kick and downhill play. And okay, this guy drives and kicks, and then the next guy drives and kicks, and then the next guy drives and kicks, and all these convoluted passes to really throw a defense off. The Rockets generally have the least amount of passes on a per possession basis of any team in the NBA. I don't have the statistic in front of me, but I know that it's been mentioned before on the broadcast. I know we've talked about it before about this team. They take care of the basketball, and that's part of their team identity. But I think there's an idea here that by sharing the basketball, by letting everybody touch it, by everybody getting their hands on it, it kind of allows you to feel a little bit more part of the game, and maybe you're a little bit more in that kind of that flow state offensively where you feel a little bit more involved, and then that leads to some better overall offensive production. So I am, curious if that's anything that can be built upon from this Rockets game, or if it's just simply a matter of the Rockets spend a ton of energy on defense and they got 4.5 days of rest before playing this game. So they looked fresh and had one of their best offensive performances of the overall season. It might just be really as simple as that. Now, I did want to run back a clip. Ime Udoka was asked about Fred VanVleet post-game, and I thought it was a very interesting blurb here. Shout out to Kelly Eco of The Athletic for asking about Fred and his role on this team. Let's run that clip back really quick and we'll talk about it before moving on.
Coach, just seeing how important Fred is to the offense, how important is it to find that balance of having him create for others, but also have others, create shots for him as well?
Yeah, I mean, that'd be the perfect formula and take some of the stress off of him. Alperen's, like I said, he's a hub down in the post that creates shots for other guys. But the more I'm in and Dillon, Tari, Jalen, all those guys can grow and he can play off ball and be the recipient of some of those easy shots. It'd be beneficial for him, obviously, to keep his legs fresh throughout a game. He's doing a lot on the defensive end as well, guarding McCollum. Did a great job in the first half on him, 2 for 9 at halftime. And so, you want to be the recipient of some catch and shoot and easy assists, easy shots, instead of having to be the initiator or creator every time.
So I know that I've mentioned this before on the show, but it's always refreshing, hearing something that we've highlighted or discussed on the show and then having Ime basically kind of confirm it. There's a level of vindication there, if I'm being completely honest. But, for everybody who gets disgruntled or frustrated with Fred's performance, right? Fred is responsible for a lot for this Houston Rockets team, right? He's responsible for setting the table. He helps set the tone defensively. He gets the guys organized, and he conducts the offense from start to finish. Pretty much most possessions where Fred's on the floor, he's running the show. And it's not because of a level of dependence that Ime has on Fred. It's not because Fred doesn't know how to play off ball. It's because the other guys haven't really shown an ability to step up to the plate and be that consistent driving force to really run the show, to allow Fred to sit and play off ball. Even Jalen, when he's in this insane scoring state, right? Jalen is getting his, absolutely, but can Jalen leverage that hot scoring outburst that he had in the third quarter and also get downhill and find opportunities for his teammates, right? And drive and kick and get other guys involved. Because in a perfect world, the success of the Houston Rockets this season, and I've said this before, should have been predicated on ideally the two-man game of Jalen Green and Alperen Sengun, with the other guys, with Fred VanVleet fading into more of an ancillary role offensively, playing more off ball. But unfortunately, Jalen hasn't really shown consistently enough the ability to be the Rockets' true lead guard and get them into their offensive sets and put the guys in the right spots and get downhill and get other guys involved. And Amin hasn't shown it yet either. There's moments, there's flashes, but there's also moments where Amin drives and like has these like ugly turnovers because he's very kind of one-dimensional on some of his downhill drives. And so Ime highlights, right, that he needs a little bit more from the other guys, from the other perimeter players on this Rockets team in order for Fred to be able to take that role and play a little bit more of a backseat role and get some of those easy shots where, you know, he's just standing on the perimeter and he can get some of those catch and shoot opportunities rather than always having to, you know, shoot off like dribble pull-ups from, you know, a pick and roll, you know, a screen by Alperen Sengun, or, you know, the late shot clock threes that he has to take when the Rockets offense kind of bottoms out, those moments like that, right? So I do think there's a world where Ime would love to, you know, rely on Fred less this season, but he's kind of had to do it by necessity up to this point. I'm curious your thoughts on that, though. Let me know in the YouTube comments. Give me any of your additional thoughts about this Rockets game, things that stood out to you, players who deserve a shout out, all that good stuff. Coming up, we're going to talk about Alperen Sengun's All-Star campaign and the revamped All-Star game format this season in the NBA. We're going to get there in just one moment. First, today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Get ready to tackle the NFL action this season with FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. Right now, new customers can bet $5 and get $150 in bonus bets if you win. The FanDuel Sportsbook app gives you everything you need to place live bets on the NFL all in one spot. So if you get a hunch in the middle of the game, you can check out the latest stats, view live play-by-play, and so much more on the exact same page where you actually place your bets. Just go to FanDuel.com to join today. And while you're there, take a look at all the different odds, right? Check out their parlay builder, check out the different season awards favorites, season leaders, all that good stuff, or the outright favorites to win this year's Super Bowl. Right now, the Bills leading the pack at plus 450, the Eagles plus 480, the Chiefs and Lions both tied up at plus 500, and then rounding out the top five, you have the Ravens at plus 800. So for all those odds and so much more, head on over to FanDuel.com. You'll get started with $150 in bonus bets if you win your first $5 bet. Never waste a hunch and make every moment more with FanDuel, an official sportsbook partner of the NFL. And final segment here at Locked On Rockets, your daily podcast, home for everything Houston Rockets basketball. All right, really quickly, shout out to Alperen Sengun, who was nominated to the All-NBA Cup tournament team, one of the 5 players selected to be on the tournament squad for games played in group play as well as the knockout round of games. So 6 total games, the 4 group play games that the Rockets played, where they went 3-1 record there, and then the 2 games that the Rockets played against the Warriors and the Thunder in the knockout round of the in-season tournament. So a nice little honor for Alperen Sengun there, kind of highlighting his strong play through this NBA Cup tournament round or run that the Rockets went on. But I wanted to highlight here really quickly, NBA All-Star voting has officially opened up, so if you haven't been casting your vote, go get your fan votes cast, go throw in your ballots for our boy Al P. But I wanted to take a quick look at the state of the Western Conference to kind of see what Alperen Sengun's chances are this season of making, you know, an all-star team. And first and foremost, Chet Holmgren being injured for the OKC Thunder is a huge benefit to Alperen Sengun because he doesn't have to contend with him as far as, you know, being one of the front court players potentially selected ahead of him or contending with them ultimately for votes at the end of the day. But up and down the West, I mean, there's only a handful of bigs that I think can lay claim to a spot in the Western Conference. And I think realistically, there's only 2, maybe 3 guys that would be tagged as quote unquote centers that Sengun would have to contend with or potentially lose out on a spot to. So you look, I'll just go top down on the standings. Memphis Grizzlies, Jaren Jackson Jr. However, Jaren Jackson Jr. is probably going to be classified as a forward, so that shouldn't be a roadblock for Alperen Sengun. Then the Rockets are sitting at 3rd place in the Western Conference. And look, as long as the Rockets stay in that top 2 to 3 to 4, if they're in the top 4 of the West and Sengun's playing the way that he's been playing all season long, and again, ideally if he can clean up some of his inefficiency around the basket, then the numbers will continue to look even better and better as we approach the All-Star game. I feel like Sengun's going to be a shoo-in to make the All-Star game this year, and that would be a great kind of stepping stone in this Houston Rockets rebuild, getting an all-star named to the all-star team, getting a little bit more of that recognition for how the Rockets are playing. It's always fun to have a representative in the all-star game, especially with this new format that they're going to be testing out this season. More on that here in just a moment. So You've got Jaren Jackson Jr., shouldn't be competition for Sengun. Chet Holmgren, injured, gone, not a factor. Obviously, Nikola Jokic with the Denver Nuggets, he's going to be a shoo-in for the All-Star game, so that's one guaranteed person ahead of Alperen Sengun. Anthony Davis with the LA Lakers should likely be another guaranteed name ahead of Alperen Sengun in the All-Star voting. However, AD's been playing the 5 spot this season for the Lakers. There's a chance maybe he can get voted in as a quote-unquote forward. I don't know specifically how the voting's going to ultimately work for AD there, but if AD does get voted into the All-Star game as a forward, that opens up, I think, an extra spot for Alperen Sengun, hopefully. No more Karl-Anthony Towns for the Minnesota Timberwolves, and I really don't think, like, Gobert and Julius Randle, like, I can't imagine either of them, especially with the Timberwolves kind of floundering the way that they have, floating around 500 this season. Can't imagine they're going to get in. Warriors don't have a super duper high quality big, or don't have a 5-man. Obviously, Wemby with the San Antonio Spurs is the other center in the Western Conference that Sengun would have to worry about. So really, it's Jokic, it's AD, it's Wemby, and then the Kings all the way down below 500 still at 13 and 15 with Domantas Sabonis. I can't imagine that Sabonis would beat out Sengun for an All-Star team with as poorly as the Kings are playing, especially with the Rockets at the top of the pecking order. At the end of the day, will the West be able to put Jokic, AD, Sengun, and Wemby all on the All-Star team this season? I think there's a possibility maybe you can get away with doing it, especially because AD and Wemby essentially can both be played as 4s. They can play next to legitimate bigs in Jokic and Sengun, so maybe that's a factor that the other voters will consider, not the fan voters, but like the player voters, the coach voters, all that stuff. I don't know. I mean, it's going to be tough. It's going to sting a ton if it's like Jokic, AD, and Wemby, and Sengun somehow misses out on being an All-Star yet again this season, despite the production, despite the Rockets record. It kind of feels like he's a shoo-in for it, but I'm not going to say it's a guarantee, and that's unfortunate because Sengun absolutely deserves some All-Star recognition for his level of play. Let's highlight here really quickly before we wrap up the show, and I'm very curious your thoughts on the new proposed format, because, look, the All-Star game has sucked, right? The year that they introduced the Elam ending and they had that super high-level intense affair at the end of the game, that was the best the All-Star game had been in literally years. But it felt like kind of a one-off thing, right? The NBA hasn't been able to replicate that level of high leverage play and intensity between the world's literally best players ever since that moment. And so I respect and I appreciate Adam Silver and the NBA for trying to come up with something new, to inject some life into the All-Star game and generate some excitement and buzz around All-Star weekend. So this year, they are replicating the new format for the Rising Stars game. So Rising Stars game got the format change a couple years back, where it's the draft of players, where you have the 3 teams that are drafted of all the players, first and second year players, and then there's the 4th team that's comprised of the NBA G League, and then those 4 teams all play against each other. The 1 and 2 versus 3 and 4, and then you play the championship game. So 3 little short games played to a certain point threshold. That's what they're replicating with the All-Star game. So there will be 3 teams. There will be 24 All-Star selections, 12 from each conference, and then all those selections will be divided and drafted into 3 separate teams that will be led by Charles Barkley, Shaquille O'Neal, and Kenny Smith from the Inside the NBA crew. And then the 4th team will be the winner of the Rising Stars champion. So whichever team, it could be the G League team from the Rising Stars game. Whatever the winner of those 4 teams is, will then face one of the All-Star teams in the first kind of the semifinals matchup, whatever, team 1 versus team 2, team 3 versus the winner of the Rising Stars game. Each game is played to 40 points. Each team has 8 players. I like it. I like the idea of the format, and hopefully it leads to something that's a little bit more competitive. Hopefully it gives the players a little bit more of a reason to try a little bit harder. They're not going to be coasting for an entire 48-minute basketball game. It's literally just going to be, all right, first team to 40 points, no timer, no whatever. And so We'll see what it looks like. I'm excited for it. I hope it gives the NBA a fresh look at the All-Star game, and hopefully the players are a little bit more bought into it. And apparently the 4 teams participating in the All-Star game will compete for a prize pool of a total of $1.8 million, with each player on the championship team receiving $125,000 each. Each player on the second place team gets $50,000, and each player on the third and fourth place teams gets $25,000. So a little bit of a monetary incentive for these guys to compete at a bit of a higher level. Maybe we'll see if the dollar signs are enough to generate. It's probably not going to be like playoff intensity or like the Elam ending intensity that we saw that one year. But as long as it's not just the laughing stock that the All-Star game has become in recent years, that's all we want. We just want to see these good players, literally the world's best players, playing a little bit of high-level basketball in a weekend that is meant to celebrate the NBA and celebrate the sport of basketball. So I'm curious. I'm excited to see what it looks like. I want your thoughts on the new All-Star game format. What about Alperen Sengun's chances to make the All-Star game? Tell me how you felt about the the Rockets win against the Pelicans. All that good stuff. Let me know in the YouTube comments. And remember, the best way you can help us grow our show is to listen every single day on a podcast platform of your choosing. Like and subscribe on YouTube. Drop a comment while you're there. Subscribe to the daily Locked On Rockets newsletter. But as always, thank you so much for watching. Thank you so much for listening. And we look forward to having you back right here at Locked On Rockets, your daily podcast home for everything Houston Rockets basketball.